Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Greg Rains Media Sermon Podcast. I'm posting my sermons on a 1-week delay, so be looking for episodes every Sunday at 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. On those rare occasions when sermons aren't released on Sunday, you can visit gregrainsmedia.com and search through well over 7 years of archived audio sermons. Sermons are available through most of the popular podcast outlets, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. Additionally, you can access the podcast through my website, gregrainsmedia.com. And now, let's jump into God's Word. This morning, I want us to look at this idea of going beyond what normally human beings would be expected to do, and how Jesus Christ tells us to go beyond that. And I'll just tell you, this morning it's going to be something easy to say, but it's putting it into practice. But we, as Christians, should be able to put these things into practice. Let's take a look at this again. Again, I'm going to call this go beyond. But Matthew 5:38 says this: "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." Now that one I can get behind. Yeah. You do something to me, I'm going to get you.
10 times harder.
Exactly.
Stay out of your garden.
That's right. So, is that the way but now, as you know, this is the words in red. What's Jesus Christ going to say about that? He says, "But I tell you," something different, "but I tell you," notice this, "not to resist an evil person." Man, that'd be kind of hard to do, wouldn't it? But as Christians, that's what we're told to do. Do not resist the evil person. Goes on to say, notice this part, "But whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also." Man, now that would be pretty tough. But that's what we're called to do. Now, and you can't be, I know I've heard some preachers preach this, and they say, you're supposed to turn the other cheek, but after that have no further instructions. Which I guess that means then you can hit them back after that. You know, they hit the right cheek, you offer the left, they hit that one too, and then after that you can let them have it. Is that what Jesus is saying? I don't think that's what he's saying either. He goes on to say, verse 40, "If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also." Man, that'd be pretty tough, wouldn't it? But that's what Jesus is telling us. Verse 41, "And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Now, it's my understanding in Roman times, the citizens were obligated. If a Roman soldier walked up to you as a citizen living under the Roman Empire, as a Roman soldier, I can go up to you and say, "Here's my pack. You have to carry this for 1 mile. It's the law." And you give that pack to this person, and the roads are marked, and you go for 1 mile. Now after that, you don't have to go another mile. By law, you don't have to go another mile under Roman law. But Jesus is saying, if a Roman soldier comes along and compels you to carry his pack for 1 mile, go with him 2. Take it for 2 miles. Again, we're going beyond what's really and truly required or expected. Hard things to put into place. Easy to preach about. We'll preach about it this morning, but hard to put it in place. Verse 42 says, "Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away." Most of us, if there's somebody, maybe a neighbor who's always borrowing stuff, after a while you might get tired of it, and if you see them coming, you might, hide or leave or close the door or pretend you're not home or something. But this says, if they come over to borrow something, what are you supposed to... Again, it's awful easy to say, but hard to do. If he wants to borrow from you, what do? It says, do not turn them away. Now, let's take a look at all those things that are mentioned in our lesson text, and that's what we're going to look at a little further this morning, the idea of do not resist, turn that other cheek. If you give them the tunic, give them the cloak too, give them your cloak. Go for the 2 miles, and then also do not turn away. Now let's begin with that first one. And we'll use as an example Jesus Christ. You know, Jesus was silent before Herod. Now, he could have, as many of us, if I'm being falsely accused and I'm being falsely arrested and being taken before somebody, I'm going to speak out. This is wrong. This is an injustice. In this particular instance, Jesus didn't. Notice Luke 23, verse 8. It says, now when Herod saw that Jesus, notice this, when he saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired for a long time to see him. Why? Because he had heard many things about him, and he hoped to see some miracle done by him. But notice verse 9. Then he questioned him. That's a capital H there, which means he's talking about Jesus. So in other words, Herod questions Jesus, notice this, with many words, but he, talking about Jesus, answered him nothing. He does not resist. And it reminds me of what is said of him in the prophet Isaiah in Isaiah 53. You know, how Jesus was taken, or it talks about there, a sheep dumb before the shearers or a sheep dumb before the slaughter and doesn't say anything or protest. That's the way Jesus was. He did not resist Herod. You know, hey, Herod, don't you understand I've been falsely accused here? He didn't say a word. And even when he was before Pilate, he only had a few words to say. He did not resist. What we need to do is turn things over to the Lord. So how do we put this into practice for us? Turn things over to the Lord. Let Him take care of it. Which we'll find here in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 23. And Peter's using the example of Jesus and how that we really and truly we need to follow this example. He's telling exactly what Jesus went through. When it says who, we're talking about Jesus. Notice this, when he was reviled, did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten. Notice this, but committed himself to him, talking about God the Father, committed himself to him who judges righteously. Jesus Christ trusted the Father. We have to do the same thing. When we're under some kind of pressure or we're being attacked, turn it over to God. Let Him handle the opposition. But again, we as Christians, we should not resist. Now, I know the Apostle Paul, when he was arrested, he did use his citizenship as a way to, quote, maybe resist. But even then, it wasn't in a forceful manner, in a way that would bring, shame and reproach to the cause of Jesus Christ. The Apostle Paul did not, shake his fist and was demanding and mean and hateful and, I'm going to get my rights or else. Even he, in a sense, was resisting when he used the law. But we should not resist. Just like when Jesus was there, Jesus knew this is not going to do any good for me to say anything, and so he didn't. He didn't say a single word when he was before Herod. And again, very few words when he was before Pilate. Again, this is awful easy to preach on, but awful hard to put into practice. I mean, I'm not supposed to resist. Well, that's what it said. That's what our lesson text said. Do not resist. How about this next one? Turn the other cheek. Now, I think a good example of this, really and truly, a practical example that we can learn from is that of David and King Saul. Remember how King Saul, he wanted David dead because David was the one who had killed, the women would sing that song, Saul has killed his thousands and David his tens of thousands, and Saul made the logical conclusion, if they're saying that about him, what's the next logical thing for him? Well, it's to be the king. In other words, David is going to take my position. And so, you know what? I want David dead. I want to kill him. And he chases after him. Now, in 1 Samuel 24, verse 10, we have where, David has that opportunity to really take the life of Saul. If you remember, Saul goes into, to use the wording that's in the Scripture, it talks about King Saul, as we had said today, he had to relieve himself. You talk about being caught with your pants down, that's what happened. David and his men are right there in the same cave as King Saul goes into this cave to relieve himself. David comes up behind him with a knife. Now put yourself in his position. Here is this guy who's had me on the run, who wants me dead, and he's caught with his britches down. I've got a knife right here. All I got to do is, hit him in the back a few times or slit his throat, and all this that I've been going through is going to be over. David's attitude the entire time was, Saul, despite the fact that he wasn't a good man, he was an evil person, all that kind of stuff. He's the Lord's anointed. He's the one who's been anointed, and it's not for me to take his life. Now, that's what David is saying. David allows the king to leave. He takes a little part of the king's garment, a little part of his robe, cuts it off. He leaves, and there's a little bit of a distance there, and then they have this conversation. Again, 1 Samuel 24, verse 10 says, "Look, this day your eyes have seen that the Lord delivered you into my hand in the cave, and someone urged me to kill you. But my eye spared you, and I said, I will not stretch out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed." Here is someone who, if anybody had, you would think, looking at it in human terms, had a right to kill King Saul, it would be David, because of all the things that he put him through. By the way, you do remember, there was a couple times when David had been called into the palace, this is many years before, where he would play music to try to soothe King Saul, and a couple of times King Saul took a javelin and threw it right at David, trying to pin him to the wall. So put yourself in David's shoes. This man wants me dead? Why shouldn't I want him dead too? Nope, that's not what he does. He turns the other cheek, and he says, if Saul is to die, it's not going to be at my hands. God's going to do it some way, maybe in battle, maybe just his time is up, but it's not going to be me. I'm not going to be the one who does it. A couple of chapters later, in chapter 26, King Saul, again, is trying to find David. He's going here and going there in the wilderness, all over the place, trying to find David. And they go to a particular place, and the entire army is asleep. This is miraculous, by the way. The army is asleep. A deep sleep is upon them. David and one of his servants sneak into the camp. Now imagine this. They sneak into the camp, and here David and his servant are looking right over King Saul. At King Saul's head, there is a spear, the king's spear, and a water jug. And David's servant says, see that spear? I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but not much. If I take that spear and just put it like right there on his neck or right there where his heart is and just jam it through, there won't be a single sound. It'll be over with. And again, what does David do? He turns the other cheek in that he says, no, it's not for us to take the life of the Lord's anointed. Put it in God's hands. God will take care of it. By the way, did God take care of it? He did. King Saul and his sons, a few chapters later, they all lose their life in battle against the Philistines. So God takes care of the matter. But David, looking at it from a human standpoint, man, that's the perfect opportunity. Why not just take that spear and just ram it right through there and get rid of him? He didn't do it. Again, if you read that, I encourage you to read that chapter. But, David and the servants, they take the spear, they take the water jug, they sneak out of the camp, and then they get up on a hill to where there's a little bit of distance there, but they can talk down to them, and all the people wake up, and David is saying, if I really and truly wanted you dead, do you realize, see this spear, by the way, this is your spear. See this water jug, it's yours. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. And so David says, send one of your young men over and I'll give the sword back, the spear back and the water jug and that kind of thing. But he turned, in a sense, David turned the other cheek. That's the way we need to be. In all practicality, how do we today do this? Well, in Romans 12 and verse 21, very short verse, but notice what it says. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. When someone does something evil against you, you know what human nature says. I'm going to get you back. You no good, low life, whatever the name you want to add more. That's human nature. We have to go beyond human nature and overcome the evil. And this is the hardest thing in the world. Someone who means evil against you, what should you and I do? Good. Do good to them. I've heard people call it killing them with kindness, but really and truly that's what we need to do. As Christians, we cannot return the evil for evil. We have to do good. Now the next thing that's mentioned in our lesson text is giving them your cloak. And, they've taken your coat, or your tunic, it says in the New King James, and now you give them your cloak too. A good example of this, let's go all the way back into the Old Testament and look at the example of Abraham. All the way back there, the father of the faithful. And if you remember, as I'll read this from Genesis 13, verse 9 here in a minute, but if you remember, the herdsmen of Abraham and Lot are having some difficulties. They're having difficulties. They're clashing. In other words, here's my sheep and my herd and your sheep and your herd, and we're all fighting over pastures and water and stuff like that. So what are we going to do? Now Abraham could have been someone who said, you know what? God is the one who has asked me to come into this promised land, to sojourn in this promised land. I'm the one that God is speaking to. I'm the one that God has made these promises to. So you know what, Lot? You need to go this way, and I'm going to go that way. He could have done that. But he doesn't. In a sense, he's giving Lot his cloak too, because he says this. Genesis chapter 13, verse 9. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I will go to the left. Now we know when Lot looks out, he sees off towards Sodom, man, look at all those great looking pasture lands. Look how well, from this vantage point, we can look up here and see, man, that's got plenty of water. And he takes that. Abraham doesn't protest. Abraham doesn't say, well, you know what, I'm the senior man here, and I'm the one who should make this decision. It's kind of like, if that's what you want, Lot, go ahead. You go that direction, I'll go the other direction. We're brethren. We should not have this kind of bickering between us. So let's solve it this way. And that's what Abraham does. So when we think about that makes me think of this idea of, again, how do we put this into practice in our lives? And this made me think of Hebrews 10:34, how we value people over possessions. It's more important. Here's the thing. Do you realize that Abraham preserved his relationship with his nephew Lot by doing what he did? That should be the most important thing for us too. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 34 says, For you had compassion on me in my chains, and joyfully accepted the plunder of your goods, knowing that you had a better and an enduring possession for yourselves in heaven. Is the things that I have, just like Abraham and all those herds, all those things, is that the most important thing in life? The possessions that I have? No. That's not the most important thing. He gave Lot that choice. He preserved the relationship that he had with his nephew. A lesson for us to put into practice ourselves. Let's move on to that next one, which is going 2 miles. This is in Genesis chapter 50, verse 19. As you know, Genesis, we're about to read here, Genesis is coming to a close. You know, that book is coming to a close. And this is something that's said toward the very end of the book. Joseph's brothers, remember all the evil that they did toward him? You know, first, number one, they hated him because he was the dreamer. He had those dreams, and in his dreams it sounds like he's going to be over us all, and they hated him. They threw him into the pit, and just to be honest, the brothers really and truly wanted to kill him. They wanted to take his life. It was Judah who said, you know, let's not do that, let's sell him. So they sold him into Egyptian slavery. And think about all the terrible things that happened. The brothers hated him. There was hate there for them to be able to do that. What's his position? Now he, as you know, because there's a famine in the land, he saves his family. They end up being in the land of Goshen. But here's the thing, when the father passes away, when Israel passes away, his name before being Israel was Jacob, but when he passes away, the brothers think, father is gone. Now Joseph can do whatever he wants to do. You know, Joseph is second in command of all of Egypt. Joseph, in a sense, is about to go that second mile. Not only did he save them while the father was alive, he's going to go a little further. Genesis 50 verse 19 says, Joseph said to them, do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me. They sure did. Some of them, they wanted him dead or worse, you know, terrible things. But God meant it for good in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. So here's the thing. Do these people really and truly, do these brothers deserve mercy? If we look at it from a human standpoint, you know what? Those no good, rotten rats, that's what they are. They don't deserve mercy. They wanted me dead. You know what? I'm going to do the same thing to them. I've got the power. I'm number 2 in all of Egypt. I'll give the order, have them taken out and slaughtered, kill them, get rid of them. Now that's a human talking. That's human nature talking. That's not what Joseph did. All these things happen because that's what God used, these terrible things to save everybody. In verse 21, notice what he says. Now therefore, do not be afraid. Notice this. I will provide for you and your little ones. And notice this. And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So here he goes that second mile. Again, in Roman times, that Roman soldier could come to you and say, you, sir, are going to carry my pack for 1 mile. Okay, where's the mile marker? Okay, it's right here. And here you go, walking along, and here you come to that 1 mile. Most people, when they come to that next mile mark, are going to say, well, sir, that's what I'm required to do by law, and so here's your pack back, sir, and then I'm going to go back to my business. That's what human nature would do. But Jesus says, as Christians, if someone compels you to go with them 1 mile, go with them 2. And you know what? When you do that, these Roman soldiers are going to wonder, what in the world is happening? Most people, when I ask them to go with me 1 mile, they grudgingly do it for that 1 mile, and then when the 1 mile is over, they give me my pack back. Why is this person doing that? You know what? That kind of opens the door up. Why are you doing that? Well, I'm a believer in this guy called Jesus Christ. I'm one of his followers, and he said if someone compels us to take a pack for 1 mile, we should go the 2nd mile. If nothing else, that puts a little seed in that Roman soldier's head. Man, these Christians are kind of different people, aren't they? Their leader, who, by the way, we Romans crucified on the cross, their leader told them, if someone compels you to go a mile, go with them the second mile. Maybe there's something to this. I don't know. So what should we do today? Well, in Colossians chapter 3, verse 23, it says, we should exceed the expectations when we're wronged. Whatever you do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men. In other words, keep going. Go a little further. Go more than they expect that you will do. And that definitely will get them questioning what in the world is different about you. So, let's look at our last one. Now, this last one is in Luke chapter 10. By the way, this is the so-called Good Samaritan. But the Samaritan is going to help this man in need. Now, if you read the verses before we're about to pick up here, again, Luke chapter 10, verse 33, there's this man who's going on this journey between Jerusalem and Jericho, and it was notorious. There was thieves and robbers who would lay in wait as someone was going along, and they would go to that person, beat them, and take what they had. This particular individual, as we'd say today, he was beaten within an inch of his life. He's almost dead, really. And they beat him, took everything he had, threw him over in the ditch, and they left. The Scripture tells us that a priest happened to be going along that same road. The priest walks by, and by the way, as we've been studying in the Old Testament, the priests were not to touch a dead body. And so maybe in the priest's mind, here's that man over there moaning and complaining and groaning. I don't think he's going to last. As a priest, if I touch him, I'm ceremonially unclean. So you know what? I got things to do. I got to get to the temple. I've got to do my job there. And so the priest just walks on by. A Levite, who is someone who does things in the temple, had various duties in the temple. He does the same thing. A Samaritan, who in the eyes of the Jews were these half-breeds, they were part Jew and part Gentile, had no use for them. In the eyes of Jews, Samaritans were just looked upon as lower than dogs. And yet, it was the Samaritan who helped that man over there in the ditch. Puts him on his own animal, takes him in, which is where we find ourselves here. Luke chapter 10, verse 33 says, "But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion." Verse 34, "So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and set him on his own animal, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him." This all started with, who's my neighbor? They asked the question, who's my neighbor? By the way, was the priest the neighbor to this person? No. Was the Levite? No. Was this person you Jews don't think much of, this Samaritan, was he a neighbor to him? You better believe he was. He took care of this man. He did not turn away when he was needed. When this man needed help, he did not turn away. We need to be the same way. When someone needs our help, well, don't they have agencies to take care of these things? Isn't there someone else who can do it? It shouldn't be my responsibility. Well, is that the way we should be as Christians? Well, let's take a look at this. In 1 John chapter 3 and verse 17. This is pretty clear, isn't it? "But whoever has this world's goods and sees his brother in need and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him?" Somebody who truly is in need. And you think, well, you know what? Surely there's somebody else. There's somebody else who will see this person, they'll take care of it. You have the ability. You have the necessary funds. If that person truly is hungry, you could feed them. And you think, you know what, I got things to do, I just don't have time. And you walk on by. It makes it clear, how does the love of God abide in that person? We cannot turn away. Jesus Christ told us in our lesson text, we cannot turn away. We should not turn away from that. We are called to go beyond. Do not resist. Follow the example of Jesus. Turn the other cheek like David. King Saul wants you dead. What are you going to do? I'm going to get him back. Right? Right? I see the heads nodding out there. You're right. No, I can't get him back. I have to turn the other cheek. Give your cloak. They take your tunic, give them a cloak, just like Abraham. Okay, Lot, there shouldn't be this problem between us. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. Like Joseph did, going that second mile. Isn't it enough that I saved my people? Do I have to do more? That wasn't his attitude. He went the second mile. And we shouldn't turn away like that priest and Levite did. So, as we look at this lesson this morning, I don't know. As we look at this lesson this morning, we think where we stand spiritually speaking. As I said at the very beginning, it's so easy to tell you what we should do as Christians. It's so easy to say it, but it's hard to do it. I'll just be totally honest. It's hard because it goes against human nature, but we are called to do that. So as we think about where we stand spiritually speaking, are we following the example of Jesus Christ? Are we living as a Christian should? If you are, that's great. You just keep doing it. But if there's a question about it, if there's a doubt in your mind, I'm not as faithful as I used to be, and there's some kind of problem I have, this is a perfect opportunity to put those things right. So if you're subject to the gospel call, let the need be known as we stand, as we sing. And that brings this sermon to a close. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. Since I tailor the ending of the live sermon to those I see before me, I don't always mention the full plan of salvation. If you are not a New Testament Christian, just look at the examples of conversion in the book of Acts. On the day of Pentecost, those who heard the gospel message asked what they should do. They were told in Acts chapter 2, verse 38, to repent and be baptized. Also, the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8 said, "See, here's water. What hinders me from being baptized?" Philip said, "If you believe, you may." The eunuch said, "I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God." They both went down into the water, and Philip baptized the man. If you are no longer a faithful Christian, you should come back to faithful service. The latter part of Revelation chapter 2, verse 10 says we must be faithful unto death to receive the crown of life. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.